Good morning and welcome to today's workshop/webinar on business model generation. My name is Aisha Jones and I am the director of the U.S. Pan Asian American Chamber of Commerce Southeast. I'm the director of their Community Navigator pilot program, which is a program that is funded by the Biden White House and administered by the SBA. To help small businesses. The US PAC, The US PAC was founded in 1984 and is the most established and largest nonprofit organization representing Pan-Asian Americans and their related groups in business, sciences, the arts, sports, education, public and community services. As stated before, I work with the US PAC Southeast region, and here's a bit of information about them. And we cover states like Georgia, Florida, Tennessee, Alabama, and all those great southern states. Here are some of the free consultation services that the Community Navigator program offers, including startup and pre-planning, business financing and access to capital sources, business operations, credit counseling, e-commerce, import, export, and marketing assessments. We offer these to businesses free of charge, so keyword free. We also offer legal consultations and assistance, and these are some of those services that we offer, again, free of charge. Today's speaker is Dr. Brian Hunter. Dr. Hunter is the Assistant Professor of Entrepreneurship and Marketing in the Department of Business at LaGrange College. Dr. Brian Hunter serves as a global visiting faculty member in Mexico's, I hope I don't butcher this, Tecnológico de Monterrey, is that correct?
That's perfect. Yep.
Where he began, that's really fancy, where he began working as a visiting professor of entrepreneurship after completing a PhD in behavioral finance and developmental economics from the Consumer Science Department at Purdue University. These appointments at Purdue University, Mexico's ITESM University, and LaGrange College have allowed him to teach courses in multiple content areas, including entrepreneurship, strategy, economics, marketing, entrepreneurial finance, corporate finance, international business, and personal finance. Teaching an eclectic mix of subjects and working closely with hundreds of students from all academic backgrounds has given him a broad knowledge to draw from and to educate and train US PAC Southeast clients on business plans, market feasibility, financial viability, operations management, and legal structures. So we are super lucky. I'm super lucky. And I feel like my little degrees have nothing compared to all of these accolades that you have here going on, Dr. Hunter. Thank you so much.
Made it sound extra fancy.
Thank you so much for joining us and agreeing to do this webinar. I'm so looking forward to it. So I'll end my slideshow and you can go ahead and pull up yours.
Right. Okay. Everybody see this screen? It says the business model canvas.
Yep, I think
okay.
So.
Thank you for the introduction there. That was very nice. So what I would like to do here today is to give you some background on what's called the business model canvas. It comes from a book. It's called Business Model Generation. It's by Osterwalder and Pegner. I don't work for the publisher in any way. I have no association with the authors. I just have been using this for the last 10 or 12 years in the business classes that I've been teaching and have found a lot of success with it. The model follows this form right here. If you can see my mouse, can you guys see where my mouse is going?
Yep.
Okay, so it follows this format right here that looks like it has two H's like this and then sort of a very wide I right here. And what I would suggest that you do at home, if you'd like to follow along, is to kind of draw that out on a piece of paper and fill in some notes along the way so that you can get a feel for how this might work, and then in some way commit it to memory so that if you ever need to do a quick job of writing down a model and explain it to somebody in 2 or 3 minutes, it's a pretty good form to do that. I have included a poster of this same canvas that's filled in that you can use to put up on your wall like this of an office. If you want to be a little fancier about it, you can use Post-it notes so that you don't have to write on that paper. And as your ideas change or transform in your business, you could pull a Post-it note down and update it and things like that. So you would just need to click on this corner in the top right, and it'll pop the file out for you, which will give you this version right here. And okay, now I need to know how to go backwards. I got a question in chat. This is great. Love the structure. Okay, thank you. All right. There's a lot going on with the mouse. There we go. All right. So
And Brian, I will monitor the chat for you also.
okay, thanks. I'm trying to Zoom is causing some grief. All right. Anyway, this layout pretty much allows you to answer these top 9 questions. And you'll see that in this grid, there are 9 boxes. Starting mostly, people would focus on what the customers are, and then the value that is delivered by the company to those customers. These are the 2 key ideas that people would typically start with. And then the company, as it's being formed and determined and laid out, they would decide what channel will we have to reach the customers and what type of relationship will we have with our customer. So that is the premise of this grid arrangement. At the bottom, you have the cost that your company is going to incur and the revenue that you will be bringing in through sales of all different sorts. So that's the relationship you have with the company and what you provide, the financial information. And then off to the left, you have the partners that you're going to work with, the activities that you have to do on a daily basis, or maybe weekly, a normal recurring system of what you would have to create, and then the resources necessary for you to run your business. The intention of this arrangement, this document, is for you to be able to speak a common language with other people who have learned this setup, and so that you don't have to spend a long time trying to decide between the 2 of you what the overall setup for the company would be. So this is something that's often taught in MBA programs and business schools, and they might follow examples of commonly known businesses. I've put 2 at the bottom. So Airbnb would be the first one. Obviously, their customers are both the hosts for the apartments that are rented or the condos, as well as the people that are staying there. And you also get a lot of photographers that are taking pictures that are being posted on Airbnbs with hotels determining, well, if we can't book a room tonight, maybe we should start posting our motel rooms and things like that on Airbnb. So they have all the different segments off on the left side. If you're more interested in Tesla, the electric car company, you can see their example below if you are following along on the link I put in the chat. And then, so for Airbnb, they have the main ways that they're providing value to the customers themselves. So for the host, they're focusing on different things than for the guests or the hotels and so forth. And this is usually where you would spend most of your time trying to differentiate yourself from your competition, would be in the value proposition. Through the channel for Airbnb, as if you've ever seen that or looked that up, you probably have seen an online site as well as an app. You probably have seen them advertised in social media, or maybe your friend or sister or somebody like that told you about Airbnb, so that's just word of mouth, and the rest of it is just whatever they could put on TV. When they first started off, they took advantage of the fact that it sounded like a crazy idea that, you know, who would stay on somebody else's bedroom floor on an air bed, which is why it's called air bed and breakfast. And they really played it up, and much like the Trump campaign, it was on TV constantly. So that was the channel through which this company was being introduced to its customers. So that's kind of that line right there that you would follow through on this layout. Then you have the relationship. Typically, the clients are booking the sites themselves. If there is a problem, there would be customer service in place, but mostly it's just through the verification of pictures and financial arrangements on both parties' sides that, you know, the booking has been arranged, it is reserved, it is going to be there when you show up. And if there's a problem, you can call customer service. You're expected to have access to certain amounts of things, and all of that's clearly defined within the app itself. So that's the experience that the customer has as a whole using Airbnb. The rest of this is, what does Airbnb have to pay for, or what do they charge, or what do they do that makes all the beginning part of that possible? So when we look at the partners that they would have, who Airbnb would need to partner with, you would typically think that it would be the same types of people over here that aren't the direct end use customer of this service. So the photographers that go around and take nice pictures, they need the Amazon Web Services in order to put their app up on the cloud. They need the lobbyists that are going to allow the laws to go through so that people can stay in someone else's home in a heavy tourist area. All this sort of thing have to go right in order for the business to exist. So that's why it's the key. So the partners would be, who do you have to have for your business to be viable? So as we think about your own companies today, you should be thinking about, in the same way, if you lost a partner and you had a major setback, you know, how could you avoid that from happening? And by identifying who those people would be up front and maintaining those relationships accordingly. So any questions so far on the basic business model or the partners? If you have a question, you can just type in the chat and I'll try to address that right away. Okay, so when you think about the key resources of any company, usually you're going to have human resources is probably the one that most people have heard of. So when you have the intellectual property that an app or a tech company would have, that's usually going to show up here too. Human resources is going to show up as employees. Typically, then you have brand awareness and goodwill in the community. So a company like Coca-Cola, they have an enormous brand awareness, and the community knows about them, and they've learned about the polar bears on the Super Bowl commercials and all of that Coke has spent 100 years developing. That would be definitely the key resource that they would want to protect. If they have intellectual property that's their resource, they could make sure that they had patents and copyrights and trademarks and that sort of thing that could be protected in court. And then they have the app that has to continually run and make sure that you could always be in a position to be up and running in business, which very much relies upon Amazon Web Service. So Deb asks, are these the real business plans for these businesses? If so, where did you find them? So this is from Gary Fox. I just searched examples of business model canvas. It's probably not the business plan per se. It's just a very brief one-page summary of what this company does in order to make money. A business plan would probably look more like a book or a very thick notebook worth of material with pro formas and projections for 1 to 3 years forward, how many clients there would be and future plans for expansion and all that sort of thing. This is mostly just a model that you could fit, again, on just one piece of paper. There are many examples. I just tried to find 2 very well-known examples that could be used to kind of get us started.
Brian,
yes.
Is this a lot different from, like, say, a capability statement? The capability statement pretty much has a lot of this stuff in it, right?
Yeah, so the capability statement would be laid out very differently. So if you're hoping to be a government contractor, you would typically be expected to fill out a capability statement, and the documents that are on the second link off to the right at the top of the index of what this website has will show you what a sample capability statement would look like. there are typically these 5 parts in there. So you have the core competency of what your company can do that most other companies can't. You show past performance of where you've had a success story, how you're differentiating yourself from other bids that could be accepted by the federal government. Mostly probably what this document would help you create, the business model canvas, would be the company overview, which is the brief write-up about the company itself and what goods and services it provides. That's probably mostly the similarity that I could think of. But you could think of this more as like from a starting point, if you have a business idea and you were thinking about how you might arrange things strategically in order to go into business later with the federal government's buying from you. Later, you would need a capability statement after maybe 1-2 years in business before the government's going to consider you a viable supplier for them. So, sorry, what?
So would you need, I'm sorry, so would you do the capability statement first, or would you do the business plan first?
I would usually do, I would make a business model canvas first, and set up an arrangement that I could test to see if anybody would even buy from me. That would be the first thing, probably before you even go into business. And as you get started and you're learning about it, you're going to be putting together a 3-year plan, is what we usually teach, that you could feasibly execute with milestones and attainable goals along the way. After you've been in business for a year or 2 or 3, then the federal government might consider you for contracting. So it would go business model canvas before you start, before you're up and running, and then business plan. Succeed at that for a couple of years and have a success story that you could share, and then write a capability statement for the government that would allow you to reasonably show past performance. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, great. So the last couple of parts on this example from Airbnb, and just be your day-to-day activities. And if you're thinking about what you would need to do for your company going forward, whatever activities you have operating, it probably would be very helpful to think who on my team could do this going forward. So if you're going to have sales and marketing, you might need a salesperson. And if you're going to have app development, you're probably going to need a software engineer, and so forth. And that will help you to figure out what your costs would be for the company. So this could be a company that already exists that you want to just map out in a very clear 1-page document. It could also be something like I was saying that you're thinking about going into, or maybe a new division of your company that you're thinking of creating, and kind of mapping out a way of, if this is what we would be doing, what additional costs would be incurred by that. And you can see like Airbnb has a lot of legal and insurance that makes sense for what they do, going along with needing to convince the lobbyists that what they're doing is safe, and people shouldn't be worried about their constituents being in danger or upsetting, large communities of heavy tourist traffic, things like that. So whatever's going to drive all the cost of development and operation, you don't necessarily need all the numbers down there yet. That would turn into a pro forma that something like SCORE could help you with. And then you would be able to see, is it viable in terms of cost based on what my revenue expectations are? And this would just be, how many sales are you making on average sale times clients times, whatever time range you're looking at. So typically what the purpose of this business model canvas would show the type of structure that you want to have for how you're going to collect money. So Netflix might have a subscription base. Airbnb is going to be mostly just fees, service fee per transaction. And then the hosts get their commission charge, and hotels might get their commission charges sent into Airbnb as being a part of the membership of that organization. Most of it's going to be driven by the fact that they're convincing people to let strangers into the homes across the world, which a lot of cost is the tricky part here, and less tricky to collect money through the revenue once it's actually been done. So as an overview, do you have any questions about how this is laid out, or how it might work for Airbnb's purposes? Doesn't. Not yet. Okay, so there's another example. I won't necessarily go through it, but yeah, you can scroll down right below Airbnb, see the same example from Gary Fox that shows for a large scale manufacturing operation, what it might look like for them. So they're actually manufacturing, so they would have a very different sort of business model than a tech company like Airbnb. Okay, so what I would like to do is to walk you through each section and help you consider for your own business what you might be able to do to improve what you've already got going, or maybe if you're going to set up something new, how you could answer these questions in order to get, you know, a most coherent start possible. So when you're explaining your idea to investors or potentially a future customer, that you have a clear idea that you can share, and you know what needs to get done on a daily basis and what your costs would be and your revenues that you need to keep an eye on. So the first thing that we need to do is to keep this as simple, relevant, and intuitive as possible. And like I said, I like to start with the customer. So that's the first place we need to go. Typically, what you would describe here are the demographics of who would be buying from you. If you don't have much of a background with demographics, there's several ways to break it down. You could look at geographic, demographic, psychographic, or maybe how often people would use your product. Usually this type of information can be available from a number of sources. The Chamber of Commerce nearest to you can probably help you see within those communities where you're operating, if it's a local business, what level of income could be expected, race, income, marital status, religion, education levels, and all those sorts of things, so that you know who you could gear a message toward. And if you're looking at a larger scale business, you could go to your state level, Chamber of Commerce, Department of Commerce, things like that. Or you can actually get into publicly available census data if you are so inclined to go that far into it. You can also hire marketing firms, which would cost quite a bit, but they can help you identify who the customer would be and what message would make the most sense to deliver. So for a moment, if you would, please consider the customer that you aim to reach and serve, just in general, with this particular 4 topics in mind. And I think I skipped this part right here. So what I'd like to do, if everybody's coming from a different situation, this could be, when you're thinking about this today, this could be your own business or somewhere you've worked before, a friend or a family's business, or somewhere you shop. It could be a business that you're thinking about starting. Or if you're just here having a great time participating today, you might think about your favorite team or author, think about how their business looks and how they make money, whatever it might be. Everybody's got their own situations. So while you're doing that, please consider who the customers would be for that business. And I'll give you a moment to take some notes down. It should be that on your chart, you will use, just as it's showing you here, the top right box that will go right where it says customer segments, right in here. That's where we start. Okay. And if you have any questions, just let me know. So if you're looking at this on your phone, it might be hard to see. You can download the file that I have here and zoom in. It'll let you zoom in, and it has all these same kinds of key questions right on these boxes. I know it's very small. This is meant to be a poster on a wall. So on this scale on a computer screen, it's very small, but try to break that down for you. All right. Does anybody need another moment for customer segments or need some help considering who that might be for you? Okay. So now that you know in your customer segment, this brings us to how you will provide value to those particular customers. And this is called your value proposition. It's the box that goes right in the middle that shows up right dead center. This is your company. What do they provide to the customers right here? Value proposition. So I'm going to show you the value proposition for Uber. If you haven't been in Uber before, the idea is that you pull out your phone and allow a total stranger to know your location. You disclose to them where you would like them to pick you up and where they drop you off. And Uber is the company that has your credit card information that allows the money to be transferred from your own account through the credit card company into the driver's hands while Uber takes a fee in the meantime. A value proposition for this company looks like we have to consider what the customer's normal job would look like on a day-to-day basis. So if Uber is replacing taxi cab companies or maybe people walking on their own, the jobs that the customer would have to do, the jobs that the customer would have to do is this part where it says customer's jobs right here. All of this round circle is the customer that we're thinking about. And the box over here on the left, these are the company's roles and what's happening. So the yellow part is that the customer would have to call for help. They would have to call a company, wait on hold, and then describe where they're at and tell the company, please come pick me up at this time. These are the directions that I need you to use to get here. And then find a way to, once that taxi shows up, flag them down, get in there, load all their stuff in the trunk, and then pay for it. What Uber does very well is that you can pull your phone out of your pocket and tell them right where you're at through GPS and right where you're going through an address, and pay the people that are going to drive for you without needing to necessarily interact with anyone at all. So you don't have to speak the language of the people that you're getting in their car. There is very little that they even need to know about you at all. You're not even paying them at the end. So that's what Uber does for you. The pain that it removes is that you don't have to wait too long to find out if anybody's able to drive for you. And usually they tell you they are 8 minutes away. You're not going to be ripped off and overcharged by a taxi driver that just drives you around in circles. You don't have to compete with other people that need a taxi cab. And in fact, you can share rides if you'd like to with Uber. You can split the ride with several other people. And you don't have to worry about, is the driver safe? And they spend a lot of effort making sure that their drivers are screened and any unsafe driver is prosecuted accordingly. So those are all the things that your customer wants to avoid, that in this case, if you're Uber, your customer wants to avoid. So what do? They allow instant booking. So this brings us over to what the company is themselves. Through their taxi smartphone app, or just their Uber or Lyft, same thing, they allow instant booking. You have a driver assigned to you. You know pretty much what the cost is going to be, and there's no bar back and forth with cash or change or tips or anything like that. I think you can tip them through the phone if you'd like to. Now, up to what the customer actually wants from you, they want to show up on time. They want an affordable, fair price with professional drivers, and they want an easy way to pay. And I'm sure, a safe arrival is part of that too. So it does save time when you don't have to be too confused about when the cab is coming. You can see right on the map when they're going to show up. The driver is very polite. There's a way to rate the drivers from 0 to 5 stars. and you have a map the whole way so that you can make sure that where you're going is where you're supposed to be, and they're taking the route that avoids traffic and disruption as much as possible. So this is what you should be doing for your own company in order to fill out this model, where you consider by interviewing as many of your customers as you can, not assuming what they're looking for, but just talking to them and getting to know them well and listening to their complaints and listening to what they're hoping for and what they're describing that their company that they'd really dream to be interacting with could be. You have an empathetic view of the customer, and then you design something that is the business that addresses all of those types of concerns. That's what a value proposition would be, that you would fit into that middle box. I have a little bit of a script that would work well for the capability statement that Aisha had asked you for, or asked me about earlier. So when you describe your companies in that sort of small box, you could say, we do this thing for these people, and we deliver it in this way, and you probably have seen something that looks a lot like this in this particular similar situation, providing this benefit or key result or feature in our products. Okay, and that's usually what this value proposition would look like. You can also write it out as, for this particular demographic or customer who has this need, our service or product is in this category that provides this type of benefit. Unlike our other competition, our product or service is primarily different in this way. And then you can pretty much cut it off there. It doesn't need to be much longer than that. And that gives you that center workpiece that you might be thinking of. How would you build a company and what does it do? Usually when people are sharing their idea, they're focusing most on what is it that we're going to do. So if we're a bakery, we're going to make wedding cakes and muffins and loaves of bread and tortillas. Okay, so they would just be listing off the products that they sell. It might be a good idea to focus on some of the benefits of what your customers are really looking for. And if you're dealing with technical buyers, so if you're a business to business sort of arrangement, you might be dealing with more of a technical buyer who's going to be more concerned with the features. So if it's microchips that they're buying, they're going to need to know all the different resistance and all the different aspects of what the chips can be programmed to do and that sort of thing. That's unlike a household buyer that's probably mostly interested in benefits. So if we think about this from describing your company in terms of benefits versus features, if you were selling umbrellas, the feature would be it's got this unbreakable canopy and it has a cloth cover with a wooden handle, and you would describe all the aspects of the engineering behind that. But for most startup companies that are just mom and pop shops, what they would be thinking about would be mostly the customers they would be serving from households who just want to stay out of the sun or dry under some rain shower or something like that. So you would focus on the benefit that you're selling to the customer. And that's why you need to know in particular who that customer is and what it is that they really want from you. What is it that they're trying to achieve? What causes them pain? And what do they ultimately dream of, so that you can describe exactly what it is that you would be creating. This is the mostly academic way of doing this. In real life, people might think that they're going to be going out and doing something, and then what they really get is either no customers show up or they get quite a few more. If, for example, I wanted 25 people to show up to this webinar, I would probably have to reconsider the time of the day that this was offered, the holiday aspect with Diwali, what it was that the subject was, how it was described to who the customer was, and that sort of thing. So it can be an ongoing process where you can correct with time what it is that the feedback you're having from your clients, hopefully, if there are any. So any questions about the value proposition portion that describes what your company does to provide for its customers?
Jennifer, do you have any questions?
No, I'm good so far. Thanks for going through each one of these point by point. It's been super helpful.
Okay. All right. So from there, we've got to figure out how we're going to be able to get our offer in front of a customer. And it's not just going to be the case where they bang down your door to find you. Deb asked, what happens to companies that don't do this? What they might have a hard time doing is describing to their initial employees what it is that they do in their companies and what the employees should be focused on. Usually this is a very good way to explain to the entry-level people who are just starting off at a company, you know, this is what we focus on, this is our mission, this is the value that we have in the public's perspective. We try to always deliver this thing in this way. Usually if the employees can't understand what it is they're doing, then they're probably just going to be a lot of wasted time and effort. And it also will be difficult for the customers to understand what it is that your business does. So if they look at your website and they can't tell what it is that you even do, I don't know if you've had that experience where you looked at a website and can't tell what the company even does, they're probably not ultimately going to end up as a customer. So it helps with new employees and it helps with customers. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need a way to make sure that we can always deliver our product to the customers that we have that are existing and retain those old customers and then upsell them if possible. That's to show them, you know, a new product that came out of a new line of what you're doing, or a more if you have the good, better, best version of whatever you offer, you might be able to upsell that customer to the higher level and the higher income level, the higher revenue generator of your company. You need to make sure that you're always able to be accessible to these customers so that you're not losing them, because the difficulty of getting a customer is going to be initially the biggest problem. And then from there, you'd rather keep them instead of having them go on their way to another company that might provide something more current or more interesting, or maybe just advertised in a more relevant way for that particular type of customer. So this is how you would find new customers, retain the old ones, and upsell the customers that you managed to get. And it's all about, if you think about who your customer is and you start off with that is the starting point for all of this, you got to think about, how do these people want to be spoken to? What channel or method of communication would they be most comfortable and familiar with? I can tell you that my 95-year-old grandmother would have a really hard time with the idea of looking up something on a website. But if somebody called her on the phone and somebody else was helping her with it, she might have an easier time agreeing to something. And so it's all about, if you consider where people are in their life cycle and what they're able to handle and what type of decisions they're willing to make, the channel that you choose to be talking to the people. So is it through print media? Is it snail mail? Is it email? Are you on the evening news? Are you in newspapers? Whatever it might be, you want that method and the type of language that you're choosing to deal with your particular type of customer to help build as much trust as possible so that they can agree to buy from you without too much hesitation. And of course, if you're not able to get the word out and people don't show up as customers, the idea probably doesn't survive, right? Like, if I was trying to get 20 or 30 people in this webinar and it didn't happen, it might be that the way in which it was arranged, how I arranged it, it would need to be switched quickly, or, you know, I might run out of people who might express interest. So it's all about, how do you put your message in front of the people who would perceive it in a willingness to pull out their credit card and swipe and buy something from you. So if you're not able to do that and they don't even hear of you, you're pretty much out of luck. If you've ever been in a really upscale mall, you might have seen like a Tesla store. You can probably buy a Tesla online. You could probably look at Tesla's app and see what it might cost to buy a Tesla. You know, so like the Tesla example down here, where they have channels, they have their retail store, they have their website, they go to car shows and conferences and events, and then they make sure that Elon Musk is in the news every single day, right? So today he's in the news because he bought Twitter, I think, right? And then tomorrow they're going to launch another rocket and they're going to put his face on it or his car, whatever they're going to do. They're going to always make sure that you're always hearing about Tesla, SpaceX, or whatever other initiative there is with Twitter. And it's all by design, right? They're constantly having you think about it so that you could consider every single day, maybe I want to buy a Tesla, right? And eventually they'll get enough people that maybe the new customers will turn into repeat customers and show everybody what their great car was. Maybe it's not great, I don't know, but they have a way to get as much of their name into the public's ear as possible. This is how Donald Trump was able to get so much time and people's attention, was he was constantly in front of everyone on the news. And so he had a whole bunch of free publicity before the election, and at any time when they did polls, it was like you had heard Donald Trump's name 45 times every day for almost a year before he was elected president. So they chose to go after just the media as hard as they could and do some stunt every day to be in front of everybody. That wouldn't work for everybody, obviously, but that is one way to get as much attention. You mostly just have to consider, what would your clients trust and how do they want to be spoken to and what are they used to using? So if they don't read the newspapers and you're thinking they do, it's not going to work. If you think that like they read emails, like I think my students read emails, I used to, now I know they don't. So I don't bother, right? It's a waste of time to email students. You have to tell them in person to do something and then hold them accountable, or it doesn't matter. So that's just my particular line of work. Whatever works for you to where you can guarantee get your message across consistently and reliably and without any version of like the telephone game with the string and the cups where everything's getting mixed up. That's what you need to be doing for your company, and set that up from the start so that you can convey what that message is of who you are and what you do to the particular type of customer segments that you're going after. Okay, any questions about the channel?
No, I don't have any question. I think you explained it really well, Brian. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. All right, so next you have the relationship that you want to design with your customers. And this is all engineered. If anybody's been in a McDonald's before, probably most of you have, you might have seen the McDonald's play place. Why do you suppose they have the McDonald's play place with the jungle gym and the slides and the big ball pit? Why would they do all that? I'm sure you know. I'm just
Just
asking.
customer engagement.
Yeah, so they're getting families to bring their young children to McDonald's and getting those kids used to showing up. And probably there's not a lot of profit to be had in hosting birthday parties at a McDonald's or designating 25% of your square footage to a jungle gym. It's probably not a whole lot there, but really what they're going for are the parents or the grandparents that are going to be spending the money while they are there. And if you were a young person that really had a positive memory of McDonald's, 15 years later, as an adult, you might be in a position to again have some children and perpetuate that cycle. And while you're spending money on things, you might be buying not a Happy Meal necessarily for yourself, but you might be spending $3 or $4 on Coca-Cola that costs McDonald's a little bit of money, and buying a whole bunch of the things that are high margin products instead of things like Happy Meals that are probably done more at cost. And eventually you might be spending money on the highest end stuff. I'm not sure how McDonald's works with this particular example of this guy in the suit and bow tie here, but if you think about the company that you operate, what you would want to develop is the middle of the bell curve being the customers that you would have being moved down a pipeline from a younger, less familiar with your company, less willing to trust you or afford things, moving into a situation where they consistently can pay you for the middle part of their lives between 25 and 70 Okay. And then eventually they purchase your higher end products so that they become the more premium. They want the highest end offering that you have. When we look at this customer lifetime value, they're just taking what these people are spending multiplied by what the portion of it that you get to keep after you take your costs out. So whatever the average value of the sale that they contribute, you multiply that by the number of the transactions that you have times the amount of time that they keep coming back. So if this is that they spend $5 every month and once a month for a year, then that's 5 times 12. And then if it's over 10 years, you've got $60 a year times 10 years, that's $600. And then you just figure how much of that would go into, after you take out cost, how much do you keep? And what you're trying to do is sustain the middle section of this as long as possible, because this is going to be where most of your profit and revenue would come from. All right. So the question here is, when you're thinking about how to develop that pipeline of customers, you would have to think of, do you want your company to have a personal touch whenever you're dealing with people face to face, or do you want it to be more automated? So like Airbnb is very automated until there's a problem, and then you would be talking with their customer service. You got to think about, in your company, is it important that you retain people? And what type of future maintenance schedule or upgrades or renewal of a subscription might there be later on? And is that possible? So you got to design that from the start so that people know that when they buy a car, for example, they would need to bring it back into your service center regularly to maintain it for things like oil change, tires, mufflers, all that sort of stuff. It's built into the user manual from the very beginning. They're not figuring it out 10 years later. Here's a way we could make more money and then call people back. It's all from the start. So if you can't figure out what the lifetime value of your average customer is, usually what they do is they give some kind of rewards program. So I go to Kroger's a lot, and there are Kroger cards. Every time you swipe a Kroger card at Kroger's, a grocery store, they tell the central database of, here's what this person bought, and they can compare that against what did we pay for it, and what's their average spend per month or per week. And when they buy this one product, what else are they buying along with it? And how is that changing over the years? And then they can aggregate all that information and look above that for cities, states, regions, and then for the whole country. And so they can do a pretty good job by giving you 10 cents off a gallon on gas or something like that. They can do a pretty good job of promoting the products that are most enticing to you and profitable to them in the meantime, to make up the difference of whatever the loyalty program was. So that's when you think about how do you develop the relationship and what people are going to be looking for from you across their lifetimes, and how you're going to be able to sustain their business over a number of years to get to where their most profitable state later is in life, where they're not thinking about swiping their card or how much it costs them. They're just thinking, I just need this problem taken away and solved for me. That could be done. So you got to spend some time thinking about what relationship you have. And there's a video here in each one of these sections that might help you. These are geared toward college age students. So if that's not really the level that you're at, you could spend more time probably reading the book, this business model generation book, or the value proposition design book that I'm using to put this together today, to think about how to develop that for your own company. All right. There was a question, how do you know which media might be the most effective to reach a particular audience? Is there a resource that measures age, income, that shares that information, or do I just have to figure it out myself? Question is where to advertise. There's a pretty good website called SimilarWeb, which I think it's similarweb.org.com. If you look at SimilarWeb and you have enough traffic for your business, so like if we wanted to look at Tesla For example, I don't know, like everybody's in a different company here, but when you look at SimilarWeb, they'll show you where most of your traffic is coming from, how long people's attention span is, who the main competitors of that business are, how quickly people go from one page and then leave it. That's the bounce rate. I don't want to get too much into this, but it gives you a lot of information of how many clients there are who are expressing interest, where they are in your specific region or across the world, and gender mixes, age distributions. That's what you're asking about. And then other things that they're interested in. Yes, SimilarWeb is free. Yes. Other things that they're interested in that they would search alongside Tesla. So if I type in Tesla, I might also be interested in these other sorts of things like tech, other green energies and that sort of thing, other electronics. I also can see main competitors, Kia, VW, Ford, Toyota, and I can compare their traffic and that sort of thing against what I look at on my own. And this just keeps going, looking at the social media that they use, what type of words they're looking for that lead you to their company. And there's a paid version to answer Aisha's question. This is the freemium version. You can get the paid version and get more information, more demographics. But this data is why Google exists. I mean, like the idea that Google is free, it's because they can sell all of their user information to whoever's the highest bidder. So that is not going to be free to get all the answers. I mean, the reason Facebook's free is because they can aggregate all of the interests that you have across age groups, demographics, and all that sort of thing to create a relationship between you and the company that is the highest bidder. Again, so that's why Facebook and Google are making all this money, because they're managing that relationship with the between the companies and the public. And people are thinking it's free when really they're being marketed to heavily. So it is a good thing to think about the relationship that you would have beforehand and the media they'd use.
Ryan, can I, would it be okay if I got Jessica and Jennifer to introduce themselves and their
Sure.
company? That might give you just like an overlook of what kind of company they have. Might help.
Sure. Sounds great.
Jennifer?
So
Hi, Jennifer.
Hey, so I don't have a company right now, but I'm in the process of thinking about how I would start one. So just as background, I did a PhD at Purdue in aviation psychology, went out to industry, worked
I
for...
know you. You didn't tell me that's who that was.
Oh, didn't think you would recognize me. But yeah, I saw you post this on LinkedIn and I got super excited about it. So
Right on.
that's why I signed up.
It's been a decade.
I know.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, no, so this has been super, super helpful. Okay, so I kind of needed to pay off my student loans. So I went out to industry. I worked for a couple of years. I'm getting my career to a good spot, but now I'm thinking about like if I wanted to go back to aviation psychology and maybe like set up a consultancy or something, like what would that look like? What services could I offer? What clients would I want to work with? Like how would I go about finding those people in the first place? So I'm trying to kind of map this structure to like a consultancy essentially.
Okay. Yeah, this lends itself pretty well to where you're at. Like before you got started, just thinking through what you might do and who you could work with and partner with and all that sort of thing. It is just a brainstorming arrangement. Easier than just writing things everywhere all over and not knowing how to organize.
Exactly. I have a lot of Pinterest boards. I have a lot of ideas, but there's not a lot of structure to it. So this is kind of blowing my mind. So thank you.
Sure. It's good to talk to you again.
Yeah, likewise.
She's been silently knowing you on the whole call.
I know. I keep thinking this is Brian all grown up. Like this is so cool.
Yeah, it's been that was half my life ago.
Yeah. Same. So
Yeah. Thank you, Jennifer.
Mhm.
Good luck on your business. I hope that you do decide the world of entrepreneurship is hard, but it's great. I love it.
yeah.
Jessica?
Yes, ma'am. How are you? How are you? I got, about 10 minutes and I was listening to Brian talk and I felt like I was on Shark Tank. So I appreciate you, Aisha, for inviting me at the last minute. No, that was real thoughtful of you. Pretty much two of my businesses is it's a little off the radar a little bit from what you were discussing, but mine's is a podcast that I'm branding and marketing. The second one is going and I actually have a meeting over the phone with this company. It's a tech company. I am trying to build an app, and I'm quite sure it's going to be a lot of money that's going to have to be involved in this. This app is actually a driver app, and it's an app for women to pick up other women in the industry as far as lifting and Uber. It's going to be a complete different name. And I'm not doing it just because of the money and, because of, the stuff that I hear, but as far as safety wise, a lot of women are not safe when men pick them up. So I said, well, I would feel like I should come out with an app about something that says her ride and have women pick up other women so they could feel more safe. So I definitely want to start that in Atlanta, Georgia. And I had the conversation with one of the tech companies and they were interested. Said it never came across my desk, but you'll probably definitely take some of the Lyft and Uber customers away.
Did you hear when we were talking about Uber a little bit earlier?
I think I was still trying to chime in.
Okay. There's this, so again, I'll put this in the chat again. This is the site that I'm using that you can get to. At the bottom, there's a little bit of work already done on Uber. Sorry, where is it? It's right in the middle where it says Uber Lyft value proposition.
Mhm.
That might help you out a little bit to think about what you're talking about for the second idea.
Okay.
What's your podcast based about?
It's for the hospitality industry.
Okay.
It's for servers, bartenders, waitresses, cocktail waitresses. There's just no voice behind that industry. You see a lot of videos on YouTube. You see it's more of jokes than the real life and what a server goes through. And that's why I call it the 213 life. I definitely plan on writing a book on Amazon called Server Rich. And that's just to make servers feel more confident, more at ease, and how to really control your tables. And I tell any server, when you're serving at these restaurants and these high-end restaurants, I was in it for 18 years. You're not selling, food. You're selling an experience. And I think that's what a lot of servers are kind of misguided. And then you also have people that really don't tip, and they sometimes are just not educated to show you how to tip. There's many of things they do for servers, but I don't think there's something that's really a platform for that industry that I've seen that has blown up yet.
Okay. So it would be mostly people would be listening to it to learn how to get higher tips. That would be their main.
Well, not necessarily that, but also to voice their opinion. Every server has a story, and a lot of them like to vent. They like to tell stories. We with this podcast, I had a guy that he's a developer for reality shows and podcasts, and he linked me with a lot of people just yesterday. And they have a thing called the Emmys, and that's the podcast awards. So I submitted my information, to be a nominee. May not happen, but it is on iHeartRadio. You can Google it, Server Chat Uncensored.
Cool.
And yeah, so that's pretty much my two go-tos right now. And the main thing is the platform, the branding, the marketing, the revenue, and of course you have to have traffic. You have to have, an audience, before you do anything. It has to be interesting.
Yeah.
And a
So
plan. You gotta have a plan. Right?
always, definitely gotta have a plan. So,
You were talking about the driver app. There's a free tool. I'm not sure how far along you are on it. I think you're right. It does sound very expensive. Every time one of my students wants to put one of these together, it's always like, $50, $60, $70,000 before they're even starting anything. There's a tool that you can prototype screen to screen how you want it to be laid out, so you could show it to somebody as to how it might function, even though it's not actually going to function. So it's just from Marvel, and it's called Pop App. And it's fairly intuitive once you get started. Lots of my students have used these to show what they have an idea for their app, and they don't have to spend, 10, 20 grand to have somebody actually design a working one. They could also have people click through it with their finger and see, is it like intuitively arranged as to what I might expect to have next. So that's just an idea.
No, thank you. I'm
Yeah.
definitely gonna be looking into this.
Pop App. I put the link in the chat box. Okay. All right, good. That was a good idea, Aisha. That was good. Thank you. And Jennifer's here. And that's not strange at all.
No, totally not weird. This is totally
Not
normal.
weird. All right. So here we go. We have revenue. This is basically how you're going to make money. And when you're thinking about how you got to make money, usually you're going to want to make sure that you are making more money than you are spending. And if you can't do that in the first year or 2 years or 3 years, you got to make sure that eventually your revenues will exceed your costs. So there is this concept called breaking even, where if I have a fixed cost to go into business, so if it's for that app that we were talking about, maybe it's $75,000 in cost just to get started. And then variably, as I add users, I might have to have more cost from Amazon Web Service, from traffic, something like that. And so my costs start at a certain point, maybe 75,000, and increase from there. My revenue starts at 0 and increases with every additional sale. And I understand it's probably not going to be linear, but this is just to make things simple. It will show that your revenue is a straight line from here upward, not a hockey stick. And your costs are also determinable from the start and go up incrementally along the way. The idea is to get to the point where your revenue, all the sales you made, are higher than what you spent to go into business, which is the start of that app, plus whatever you incurred along the way for all the sales that you had to make to get to the point of profitability. So if you can imagine modeling that, there's a really good Excel template that comes from Score. That's just a break-even template, and they help project from what usually, instead of units sold, will show maybe 1 to 3 years. If you're able to go 3 years without making any money at all in profit, but can get to the point where you've sold enough units of something, so that's consulting meetings, if you're Jennifer, or if that's podcasts downloaded and apps, ad placements and all that sort of stuff, however you'd be bringing in money, if you could make it for 3 years or however long it takes you till the point of profit, you might be able to model that before you got started. And the main thing is thinking about how much do I need to charge that would allow people to actually pay me. I can't charge too much for who my customers are, or more than they're willing to pay based on how much they trust me, and how often they would be coming back to my company to buy from me again. When you think about like repurchase or subscriptions, or the model that you might use to collect money, if it's just single payment once and then they disappear, that's very different than setting up a schedule to mow lawns every 2 weeks for a year, right? So it's all about how quickly can you get to the point where all of your costs have been covered so that a profitability would be potentially able to be had one day. Just because somebody's great at doing something and they're willing to do it 10 times, they might not even be able to get to the point where they've covered the fixed cost of going into business and the insurance and the licensing alone without even being able to ever one day pay themselves out of anything that hasn't been borrowed money from somebody else. So there's another video about that on here. And there's a lot of templates for break even that you can put in all your costs. Like I said, insurance, licensing, part-time employees, consulting, contractors, whatever it might be. You can add up all those costs to determine what's fixed. And then you can look at a cost of goods sold for one unit to be sold. You can look at that to see incrementally how much are your costs going up a long time. And then usually people don't like huge gouging price jumps if they're paying attention to what they paid prior. Like my insurance went up 20% this 6 months with no explanation at all, right? So like people usually aren't going to respond too well to that. So they might want a consistent price year to year with a little bit of an increase and hopefully a decrease with scale. So you got to kind of figure out what your revenues could be going forward that people would be comfortable with. And you don't want to print off a bunch of menus and then decide later, well, I got to change all my prices and start over again, or, you know, advertise a certain price and then make it drastically different later. So revenue is something to consider before you get started. And then along the way, you can do like additional services for more money as you hire more people on or figure out how to expand what you can offer on a small scale.
Okay.
So any questions on revenues?
My Wi-Fi is going in and out, but I definitely appreciate all this information. This was definitely something that I need to hear.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Okay, so next up you have key resources. And for most people, that's going to be human resources. If you're going at it alone and you're self-employed and a sole proprietor, then it's whatever resource that you have knowledge-wise or your own creativity that you can put into the company. A friend of mine made a board game company, and it was, he had no money. He had no tools. He was using his TV because his monitor broke on his computer. And it was all just his own creativity. One guy sitting alone with his dog in a living room for 3 years, and he made a game that became extremely popular worldwide, and now is able to trademark it, copyright it, have office space, all the things that would come along with having a lot of sales. So lines of credit and opportunities to get credit cards and loans. So all of that came later. But he pretty much just started with the human resources between him and whoever he was able to recruit to volunteer initially to help him create it. Most people start off somewhere along those lines, unless it's really capitally intensive and they have a lot of money to be able to buy machinery and tooling and facilities and, you know, buildings and vehicles and all that sort of stuff. So it helps to identify of those resources which are the most important to you that you can't lose. If you're going to have a key employee and they decide to quit, and you're going to go out of business because of that, then that's a major threat to your company. And you would want to work on a system that would allow you to train someone else very quickly in the instance that that would happen before that person quit. And that person might be the one that creates that system and the handbook and whatever it might be, so that someone else, an assistant or a new hire, could very quickly come on board and allow the company to be sustainable. That's mostly going to be HR for most of what you are describing. And for something like a consulting business, it could be the portfolio or the workbook that you have of all the documents that you might work people through and the steps that you take them through in the system that's going to be in place to get them from where they're starting to where you want them to be. And podcast, I suppose it could be scripts, it could be tech equipment and contracts with content suppliers and things like that. So whatever it might be, whatever key resource you have, you might want to consider upfront what happens if I lost that, and what could I do to make sure that I don't lose that. Along with that goes key activities. So we are working our way to the point of we did revenues. We've done this part right here. I think we just did key resources. So we're just in this last corner right here. So anything that you would do on a day-to-day basis that would allow you to solve the problems that you face for your customers on their behalf, and you fix things for them and make sure that things are all solved and everyone's willing to pay you for that, that could be, we fix people's broken whatever, we repair things, or we come in and we assess whatever the situation is, and we make recommendations and we fix them. That might be a consulting version. If you're the app company that would be running Uber, you probably would have a lot of tech software engineering problems day to day, and you would have to be creating patches, and you would have to always be monitoring the servers and making sure that there weren't any technological issues that would have you falter or discontinue your service. So that's a platform and network basis for websites or apps. That's why you get a lot of cost with that, is because the software engineers that know how to do all that are quite expensive. But whatever it might be that you do day to day, for me as a teacher, if I looked at what I do as a business, I would say going to class, advising students, grading homework, answering emails, all of those things that I'm expected to do on a day-to-day basis to sustain my employment. If it was a business and any one of those things weren't happening, probably the clients would go somewhere else. The classes wouldn't be offered, there would be no feedback, there would be no communication, they wouldn't be sure what they're paying for, and they're just going to disappear. All right. So you probably, for your own purposes, could think of what are the things that you would have to do for the business to remain viable over a long period of time. And then usually what you want to do is create a system that can be in place for this to continue happening if you are not there. So you would want to be able to hire a manager and tell them exactly what needs to be done regularly so that you can go on and do something else, or go to the beach and relax. Eventually, retire and still have the income off of the business. But you have to design it in a way of knowing what those activities are and designing the systems that would be perfectly able to be adjusted as problems arose. So that's going to be, again, different for everyone, but you could think about it on your own and consider that. Okay, we're down to key partnerships and cost. Usually there are going to be people that you are willing to take the chance on that aren't your employees, who you can trust to help your business stay afloat. If you're going to need a lot of capital, a key partner that you might have might be a bank. If there would be a lot of deliveries that you would be running every day, like Amazon, a key partner would be like FedEx or UPS or the United States Postal Service. These would be the types of outside entities that you must have in order for your business to stay profitable for years. So you design a network of partnerships with these people who they might be able to survive without you, but you cannot survive without them. And so if you need to have alternatives in case that they fail or they disappoint you or they become your competitors, something like that, you might need to be able to have a plan in place for where you could go to find the same sort of service or assistance that they gave you before, once they're no longer willing to work with you. So this is an idea of, if you're not able to do everything yourself and you have to eventually trust people, who could you go to allow a little bit of your time to turn into a lot of customers later on? For my friend who did board games, he hired a whole bunch of people that became his artists and designers that created all the little figures and all the artwork in the game. And then he hired a lot of translators that could take his game that he made in English and translate it into Korean, German, French, Spanish, a few other languages. And so he was able to, instead of hiring these people, he was able to use their services as contractors and turn his company into a much more successful outcome than he would have been able if he just continued to work himself out of his living room, off his couch, right? So it turned into very much, he had to consider who could he basically marry his business to. He had to consider who should he hire versus who should he take on as a contractor part-time, what amount of risk he was willing to take from any of those partnerships, and what amount of trust he was willing to give them to say, like, if they let me down, what's the risk to me? Where could I stand to lose in this? So yeah, thanks, Jennifer. So the last bit is when you're thinking about costs, this is where businesses tend to have the biggest problem and tends to shut them down. Usually, some costs are fixed, things like renting a building, salaries and payrolls, and equipment that breaks down. Those are going to be fixed costs. Costs that are variable, like if I sell another product, I have to ship one more box, or pay a salesman one more commission fee, or advertise a little bit in order to get a few more sales, something like that. Those are your main costs that you want to consider. So again, when you're thinking about how this line sets up, you would have fixed costs where you're always paying that rent and those salaries. And then as you're shipping the additional box, your variable costs start ticking up, and you want to make sure that your pricing is set in a way that eventually your profits would allow your revenues to be greater than your costs. This is where businesses tend to have the most problems. Usually there are two cost structures that can be set up. You have whatever it costs me plus some amount. That's how contractors usually charge. If I spend $500 buying tile for your new floor in your house, then my structure is I add 20% above cost. So that's, $500 for that tile. I can get it done in a day. I add 20% above that for me, so I make $100, and I charge a total of $600. That's a cost plus arrangement. A lot of companies that provide services like what you guys were talking about with this consultancy, that would be a value added. So they don't know what your costs are. They're not going to have any idea. Your customers won't know. But you can say, I'm adding this value to my customers' lives or businesses, or taking away the problems that they face, and I'm adding this dollar's worth of money to their financial situation. So I'm going to take a portion of that. They're going to end up with a better deal than what they're paying me for. I get paid for it, and everyone wins. That's value added. So you can either charge for cost plus or value added. And ultimately, again, the most important thing is that your revenues exceed what those costs are in the end.
Are there any resources for figuring out how much to charge, or is it more just going back to the break-even thing, looking at your fixed costs, the things that you can't?
You can call around and pretend to be a customer.
Okay.
And maybe don't use your real name.
I like it.
And say, hey, so here's what I was thinking about doing. Can you give me a bid? And they say, yeah, sure. We got it broken down this way, and we charge this much. A lot of times people that are getting started off look at what they're paid per hour in their other job, and they think, well, this is going to be this number of hours to me. So if I'm used to making $48 an hour and I want it to be a better deal than that, I might charge $60 an hour. And so I have a sense of how many hours it costs me to do this. They don't know how many hours that is. And if it ever came up to, why are you charging me so much? You could say, well, we're meeting for 10 hours a week. So there's that. And also I'm saving you this much more on top of what you otherwise would be getting if you didn't use my skill set in a consulting way. A lot of it also is you have contracts with people. So if you sign a first contract and it says $60 an hour, they're probably going to want that for a while. And you might not be able to raise that much, but as you get a new client, you might be able to charge 75 or 80 to them and 60 to the other, and they might not ever figure it out, right? Because they probably don't talk to each other.
Okay.
So they won't see your books. But
I do need to drop, but thank you again. I
yeah,
appreciate this.
Have a good day. Good to talk to you again.
Yeah, likewise.
Okay, so the book, the material that I've been using is from Osterwalder and Pigner. I have nothing to do with this company. These books are published in many languages. They're free and PDFs online. If you search for this book, the name of it and PDF, they'll both pop up. maybe 15 different languages. The framework that we went through, we filled out the customers, the value proposition, the relationship and channels, revenues and cost and revenues, and then you had key partners, resources and activities, and the value proposition. The box at the top is just, you would write my idea for my bakery or my idea for my app, something like that along the top. And you could very quickly show people what you were thinking for the concept that you had in mind. So you could consider memorizing that. And then the next time you have to jot down your ideas, the way I think about it is I draw 2 H's. So H, and then a big I, and a line at the top. And then I start filling in the boxes. Some other people just print out one of these and put it on the wall, like I said, and then they just put Post-it notes up on there and they think about what idea they might like to start. So that works if you print out this big poster at like a FedEx. But for the most part, the amount of words that would fit on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper will get you there this way. So that's what I had for today. If there's any last questions, I can be happy to answer them. Otherwise, it's been a pleasure. So any last minute questions?
I think this is amazing. I really learned a lot from it. I've sat through some other business model Canvas sessions, and I thought this was really good. You explained it really good. And I like all the examples that you gave also. They were really relatable. So yeah, it's pretty good. Thank you for that. Will you send me some of those links that you mentioned, Brian, and I can send them out to the people that registered that couldn't make it?
Sure. Yeah. If you copy the chat box, I don't know if you look at the chat box, there was the one for the app. I don't know if that's useful.
Okay.
And then the site that I'm making now changes every day because I'm doing it for class. But if anybody wants to use that, they're welcome to. It's publicly available just by that link. And the other one, I'm not sure what else I told people about.
The site.
Oh, SimilarWeb?
Yeah, SimilarWeb. Yeah, I like that one a lot.
So that works really well with like a large scale company that they're not going to have really small traffic websites. I'm not sure how many hits it has to have before it starts registering, but you could think of like your nearest competitor that would be on there and compare your business against theirs, and it might be some similarity other than scale.
And does it matter if it's like what type of website, if it's like a nonprofit business or like retail or anything like that?
No, it won't matter. It's going to look at how many visitors there are, how they're getting there, where they go before they're there and where they go after. So whatever traffic led them to that interest and what they followed up on afterward, it shows how long they spent on each page, the keywords that they were looking for, and their overall interests. So if you were thinking about how to empathize with the type of people that you're thinking about working with, you might see what their top 10 interests are in a way that aren't your own interests and understand better how to deal with them on a daily basis. Or who you could partner with to get extra clientele in the door.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I was kind of glancing through it as you were speaking. So yeah, I'll definitely have to keep that in my saved websites. Yeah, so I'll copy the links from the chat and I'll send it to everyone that was registered. Hopefully we can have this again because it was really informative. Jessica just sent me a text and she said, God, I hate that I had to jump off and that I jumped on late. So yeah, she was
all right.
into. I think that suggestion that she had for the ride share for women was great because I do a lot of ride shares and sometimes I feel like when I come home late at night, I feel kind of worried a little bit.
Yeah.
And I do like try to get women drivers. So like I'll cancel the ride until I get a woman driver sometimes. Yeah.
I think Uber was trying to deal with that when they were saying you could pool 4 people together.
Mhm.
So like if you had 4 people all picked up at one spot after a conference or something, you could all get in the car together and you wouldn't be you and one driver in a car that you don't know anything about. It would be 4
Yeah.
against 1.
Yeah, but then the pandemic happened.
Right. Yeah.
But I think they're doing that again. I think they rolled that out again, the pool. I've gotten in a couple of pools, but I don't really care for it. I like to be alone.
Oh,
I don't
saves
like people.
$50.
Yeah, this
All
was
right.
amazing. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. I will send you the recording once it's done. I guess I would stop the recording. Yeah, I will send you the recording.